Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So the age of Aisha radiallahu anha. You know, when they make claims about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you should just say, so what? What's wrong with it? What's the matter with you? You can't just sit there and just absorb all of the attacks, the arrows, as if we are now being in a court case and they're the judge, jury, and executioner. With all due respect. And the issue for them, for the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, is one, a misunderstanding of Islamic legal or moral theory or reasoning, and it's also because of contemporary Western culture. And the way to deal with this is in the following way. One thing is, a lot of people cite history, which is a good additional argument, but it's not the core argument. And I don't like using it necessarily, because a lot of liberals or the people that we're talking to will basically say, oh, but times have changed, we're progressive, we disagree with that now. And it's not good to use that as a core argument, but it's good as a supporting argument. But nevertheless, just say to them a few things. When it comes to age of consent, or when it comes to the marriageable age and so on and so forth, we have a very robust moral and legal theory or reasoning. And we say the following. The first thing we have to understand is the usuli principle of there is no harming and no reciprocating of harm. This is a well-known principle in moral and legal reasoning in the Islamic tradition. So we would argue that there can't be any psychological and physical harm. The second moral and legal principle is urf, meaning social custom is determinative in fiqh. Is this clear? So think about these two moral principles or legal principles. Number one, there is no harming and no reciprocating of harm. And number two, urf is determinative in fiqh. So let's apply that situation to Aisha radiallahu anha. Based on those principles and based on the life of Aisha radiallahu anha, we know that there was no physical or psychological harm. The age is irrelevant. We're applying the principles here. We also know from an urfi perspective, her father, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, said, take her. The society itself didn't even disagree with what was going on. So it was based on social custom as well. So what's the problem? These are timeless moral and legal principles. Maybe if you apply them in an orthodox Islamic context in today's society, we will basically say it will be blameworthy to marry a 9-year-old because the urf has changed, especially in Western cultures. And it may be argued because of social and biological aspects and the development of the human being, because the human being is not just biologically, it's not dictated by the essential biological features, but there's also a form of socialization. It could be the case because of our environments that there may be harm. We stand in that possibility. But if you understand the moral and legal reasoning of Islam and you apply it in that time and in this time, you're always going to get the right answer. But if you apply the secular principles, in New York, I believe, if you have the permission of your parents, you could get married at the age of 14. In some countries it's 12, other countries 21, other countries 18. You're inconsistent. I could technically get married in New York with the permission of the parents, I think if she's 14 or 12 or whatever the case may be. And then if I go to another state in America, I go to Europe, I become a pedophile. Inconsistent, incoherent. And it's simple as that. We have moral legal principles, and we say when you apply them, you get the right answer. And at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and maybe other times too, if there's no physical or psychological harm, and the urf is basically facilitating this, and the way to assess that is obviously dealt with our fuqaha and our ulama. We're not going to discuss that right now. But if it's in line with the urf, then what's the problem? I remember the first time I took my wife to Hyde Park. It was the only time. You should never take your wife to Hyde Park. Alhamdulillah, she was wearing the niqab, she was with me, no one was messing around. They would have got in big trouble. This was, I think, before Muhammad hijab overtook the scene. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, may Allah preserve him. Say Ameen. May Allah grant him and his family the best in this life and the best in life to come. Say Ameen. So, we were discussing something in the car, and then some white guy, dirty liberal, he didn't cut his nails, brush his teeth, he didn't wash his bum, one of those guys. At the end of the day, sometimes you have to psychologicalize it. How can you take seriously the philosophy of someone who doesn't wash his backside? He's got crusty bum. Hey, Mr. Crusty Bum, why should I take you seriously? We need to civilize you. Let's be honest here, come on. Come on. Hey, so he says to her, your prophet married a 9-year-old, this, that, and the other. She just turned back and said, so what age did you want her to be? His mouth was on the floor. His mouth was on the floor. He didn't know what to say because he knew any age that he gave would have been arbitrary and it would have got him into a legal and moral mess. Islam, generally speaking, especially the Sharia, is not based on arbitrary numbers. There are some instances, but generally speaking, it's very principle-based. That's why it's timeless. You see these principles, there is no harm and no reciprocating of harm. And we have our own definitions and application of that, of course. And there is no, and urf is determinative in fiqh. The social custom in certain contexts is determinative in fiqh. When you apply that time, place, you're always going to get the right answer, and no one's going to be harmed, and everything's going to be fine. So in a London context, for example, if someone were to say to me, would you allow a 60-year-old or 50-year-old marry your 9-year-old daughter? I say no. It's immoral. Because of the Islamic principles. Because of urf, of the social custom. Because of maybe of harm as well in our particular context. Because of certain environmental factors that slow down the developmental process in certain issues. So it's not the age itself. That's arbitrary. We apply moral principles and we're proud of them. And it served us well and it served humanity well. They have the problem. But anyway, if you link this to the LGBTQ plus ideology, Gail Rubin, who wrote the essay that I mentioned in 1984, in the first 4 paragraphs, she's justifying basically pedophilia. They are blurring the lines of consent. Someone hasn't reached puberty and they are actually mutilating them and giving them puberty blockers. So on what moral ground do you have to say about this issue? With all due respect, be consistent. And this is enshrined in your law, in your so-called rights. You're mutilating children or young people, and you're giving them medicines that's actually harming them. Do you see the point here? And they're blurring the lines of consent to the degree you have thinkers today and thinkers yesterday, Gail Rubin and others, that are now saying that having sex with minors is not a problem. They actually call this a form of discrimination. Because remember gender theory? Queer theory, rather, based on the postmodern principles? We don't like categories. It includes age. It includes the kind of distinction between adult and child. That's a category based on a social construct. We want to disturb that. So it's okay for men to sleep with young boys, just like their prophet, Foucault, who raped Algerian boys in a graveyard. And you think you have the audacity to point the finger at us? You got 3 fingers pointing back. Do you see? I think that's a good answer, but if you go to history, it's kind of self-defeated. Many of these people came from marriages that were young. Many widows were the age of 18. Some of them married at the age of 9, 10, 11, and 12. And actually in law, it was allowed in Scotland, I believe in the 1800s or late 1800s, to marry a 7-year-old, I believe. And some of these things happened. And they are the basically children of these people. It's a bit self-defeating to deny it, if you know what I mean. But that's a historical point. So hopefully that addresses the question. Jazakallah, Allah knows best.
Just to add to this point, you can always ask the question, okay, you're saying it's wrong for him to marry a 9-year-old, no problem. Is this consequentially wrong or is it categorically wrong? Because remember, all of ethics is divided into 2 for them, right? If you look at ethics is right and wrong, morality. What is right and wrong? If you look at any kind of book on ethics and morality, you'll see that it's either consequentialist morality or categorical morality. These are the only distinctions that they have which are prescriptive. Virtue ethics is not prescriptive. A consequential thing is to say, yes, it's consequentially wrong because it's harmful. In which case we say, can you prove that it's harmful? Because there was no reports to show that Aisha was harmed. In fact, all of the reports show the opposite, that she was enjoying it and that she was jealous. So many reports show that she was jealous. How can you be jealous unless you're in love? And how can you be in love if you're being harmed like this? There's so many reports to show how jealous that she was and how in love that she was and all this kind of thing. There was no reports of I was being harmed and you try and find that. There's even a report that says that she went through puberty, by the way, when she married the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is a report like this. So this is number one. If you say it's categorically wrong, first of all, how do you prove something called the categorical imperative? And why is it categorically wrong? So the onus is on them, or the burden of proof is upon them. Moreover, I was doing some research on the issue. And the question is, why did they change the age of consent? And if you look when they changed the age of consent, it really happened in the 20th century. So you'll find, for example, in 1929, there was the Marriage Act in the United Kingdom. Before that, by the way, India constituted a change in the age of consent. Before England did, by the way. England did it as well in 1929. And it changed from 12 years old, you can get married at 12 in 1929, which is less than 100 years ago, to 16. And this coincided with a time where World War I had just been done. And the liberal government at the time, they instituted educative changes. They connected the time when you finish education with when you become an adult. But before, in all of human civilization, the time of when you finish education was not connected with that. So you can see why they think 16 is a more reasonable number. Because they connected it with the education system which they created themselves. So it's arbitrary, but it's also intentional. So why should we be subject to this as a form of morality?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alhamdulillah, we agree with everything which is being said by the shuyukh. Just a small doubt came into my mind with regards to the responses given to the marriage of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha with the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. First thing was mentioned that if there is no force or coercion or any dislike from either side, it would be okay. But wouldn't that be similar to the harm theory? And the second thing is that if it's correct according to the urf, and urf changes over time, wouldn't that be the same thing as a historical change? Hence going back to the secondary argument as opposed to the primary argument. Jazakumullah khairan.
Yes, that's a very good question, in fact, because we need to differentiate between the harm theory of liberalism and the maxim which says la darar wa la dirar, which is actually a hadith of the Prophet, by the way. It's a hadith which is in the 40 hadith of Nawawi, la darar wa la dirar, and another narration, la darar wa la idrar. There is no harming or reciprocating harm, and they've made this into a maxim, which is ad-dararu yuzal, that darar or harm is to be averted, okay? Now, this darar yuzal is not to be used against the qat'i nas. Let me explain what I mean. Effectively, if you do jihad, or if you do a physical struggle, okay, you will get harmed, or the chances of you getting harmed is very high. No one can say, well, there's a maxim in Islam which says la darar wa la dirar, which overrides the nas, which is the clear text of the Quran. يعني كتب عليكم القتال وهو كره لكم وعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا وهو خير لكم وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم والله أعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون. Quran, which is that كتب عليكم القتال وهو كره لكم, that the fighting has been prescribed upon you and it is disliked for يعني you dislike it, and you could dislike something which is good for you, and you can hate something which is bad. You can hate something which is good for you, and you can dislike something which is bad for you, and Allah knows and you don't know. Which shows you what? Which shows you that you cannot use this principle to override the nas. But this principle is used in conjunction with the nas. So for example, in situations like this, where you in marriage and stuff like that, sometimes you require urf. It's true. So to see, is it possible, is it not possible? Because for example, Qadi ibn Iyad, he mentions very clearly that when is it that the woman he's a Maliki scholar, he says that when is it, and many other scholars like him, when is it that the woman, because you can effectively do the betrothal before the person becomes pubescent, like the Prophet ﷺ did when she was 6. It doesn't mean that he was actually being intimate with her and stuff like that, as you guys know, right? But you can do that. And by the way, some scholars say you can do that with a boy as well, actually. You can marry a boy to a girl and a girl to a boy, but when they get older, the scholars say that, you can, they have a chance, and they use, for example, some scholars use the hadith of al-bikru to stat them, that the virgin is to be asked and so on. But that's a different story. The point of the matter is this, is that these situations, they say, they all use an Arabic word taqa, or istita'a, or qudra. These are just interchangeable words meaning ability. That's the word they use. It seems therefore that the dabit, or the principle at play for marriage in particular, according to scholars, and this is before liberalism or anything, was in fact when the woman is capable to have sex, then she will have sex. Someone will argue, when is she capable of having sex? Well, Allah says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. The family knows, the doctors know, the psychologists know, they can make an estimation. Taqdeer. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, مَنْ تَطَبَّبَ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ بِالطِّبِّ مَعْرُوفٍ فَأَصَابَ نَفْسَهُ فَهُوَ ضَامِنٌ. Whoever tries to be a doctor and he's not a doctor and he harms somebody, he is actually responsible for that. مَنْ تَطَبَّ مِنْ طِبْ. The Arabic word tib. Literally, Islam is one of the only religions which actually gives some level of authority to doctors. So it's true to say that yes, there is a harm principle in Islam, but it's not the same harm principle as these guys, because these guys, they're making it the ultimate morality. For us, the ultimate morality is Qala Allah, Qala Rasul. This is subsidiary in conjunction with the ultimate morality, and it's used to inform the ahkam rather than to create them. And for them, the harm principle is you're creating the hukum from this. It's true that it's an area of similarity in the sense that both liberalism and Islam talk about harm, physical and psychological harm. But liberalism bases its entire tradition or moral theory based on it. Islam uses it to refine or inform pre-existing divine commands that have been said by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that answer your question? Oh yeah, the urf, by the way, this issue with the urf muhakkam, which is one of the things mentioned by the scholars, and usul fiqh. First of all, the urf is based on Islamic civilization. It's not, the urf is not never the urf of the kuffar. Because I know the word kafir has some different implications, so I thought easier. Kafir in the Arabic language means disbeliever, by the way. But the kuffar, okay? Which means you cannot say, well, urf muhakkam, therefore civilization has changed, therefore we must adjust ourselves based on civilizational change. It's based on those areas of the sharia which are not qat'i already, and which inform certain processes and transaction mu'amalat, and it's only based on the Islamic one. Not the Islamic civilization, not the non-Islamic civilization, by the ijma' of the scholars. No one says you can follow. In fact, there's a hadith that says, I'm not going to mention the hadith because the word kafir, but it's there. But it says, when tashabbah, it's tashabbuh hadith. It's talking about comparing or trying to imitate the disbelievers. Some scholars say, قُصُّ الشَّارِبُ إِعْفُ اللِّحَى أو أَوْفُ اللِّحَى, there's two narrations. وَقُصُّ الشَّارِبُ خَالِفُ الْيَهُودِ النَّصَارَى. Grow your beard and trim the mustache and differentiate yourself from the Jews and the Christians. Differentiate yourself. So clearly, Islam wants to differentiate itself from the customs of the other civilizations. Does that answer your question?